You feeling stuck lately? Like life's passing you by? Get to know M.A.Y.A.
Acronym My Ambition, Your Ambition.
Reconnect with your dreams, your goals, your ambitions. Find your motivation and start to live the life you desire. Explore the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast at MAYAAkai.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to episode 25 of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. Thank you for tuning in on this Thursday. I'm always here every Thursday at 2 p.m. If nothing else, I've gotten consistent, which is key, changing up the look a little bit. I'm feeling like, this is a great conversation we're going to have today. So I felt like I really had to switch up the look. So with that being said, we got to do our housekeeping things here. So thank you for tuning in. Of course, if you are a first-time listener or viewer, welcome. As I always say, buckle up for safety. Not because it's necessarily uncomfortable. It can be. We can have a bumpy ride depending upon if maybe something resonates with you and you weren't ready for it. So it's that surprise. Now, if you're a returning listener or viewer, of course, welcome back. You know exactly what to expect. Of course, by now you should know the basic things. You can always find episodes at M.A.Y.A at MAYAAkai.com. That is my preferred place that you listen to my episodes. Of course, hopefully, right now, can I do a call to action? Can I get you all to go subscribe to my YouTube channel? All things M.A.Y.A are there as well. But of course, if you're a person who happens to have your podcast platform of choice, okay, I'm just happy that you're listening. So of course, you can always find me on iTunes, Google, iHeartRadio, and now I'm also on Amazon Audible as well. Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. It has to have the M.A.Y.A as part of the search because that's the way that it's set up. And of course, if you're here probably watching me on Facebook, you could be on YouTube, then you've probably have gotten social with me. You can always find me at Maya_Kai at Twitter and Instagram, and M.A.Y.A Kai Presents on Facebook is all the ways you obviously can connect with me. I love the feedback. I think the last several episodes have really resonated with people. Now, it could be that perhaps you've tapped into some of those things you need to work on, getting to that best version of yourself. Because, that's what I like to feel like we're doing here. That's the objective, getting to that best version of you, finding that happy space and place. Not lofty things, but the little things that build to larger things. That's what M.A.Y.A is all about. It's about pulling back that veil of self-sabotage and self-doubt to get you to that place. So being that we're episode 25, we've really kind of covered some really deep things in 2020 and probably right on point considering all the things that happened in 2020. So I'm always happy to have people aboard. Hello, Roburn. He's always listening and sharing my show. I'd ask you to do that as well. Please do a kind thing. If you find this could be something that could help someone that share the show with someone. I would greatly enjoy that and appreciate it. And as I always say to people, if you happen to have a question, feel free to ask me anything. If I can help you in any way, shape, or form, that's what it's all about. So we've gotten those housekeeping things out the way. Now, normally, we would have on Miriam McQueen. She's our musical muse here. Unfortunately, Miriam she's sick today. It's that time of year, flu season, things of that nature. So she's sick and wasn't able to make it. So I'm going to still say, make sure you follow her. You can always find her on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube at Miriam McQueen. It's just that simple as how you can connect with her. She'll be back next week. But I'm actually going to play a song she did as a cover, which for me is very nostalgic. And I think it's a great way to end the show as a feel-good moment. I think we can't have enough seriously good feel-good moments. So I'm going to end it with one of her YouTube videos of a song that she covered that I think is a perfect way to actually end the show. So she'll be back next week. Hopefully, she will definitely feel better. Hello, LaDonna Ray. Where are you on YouTube? M.A.Y.A Kai is what you can actually search, and you can find my page there. So episode 25. And I think it doesn't come probably quick enough, so to speak, because we've covered so many things that I feel was laying the groundwork to get to this particular conversation. So what do we do every show before we start? It's toolbox time, which means we're always going to say every show, every day, 24/7, your emotional intelligence should be on the table. Of course, that's your ability to perceive, control, and evaluate emotions, because you're always going to need that in just about everything that you do in life, whether it's private situations, professional situations. Having good emotional intelligence, that muscle we're always working to develop. And don't get me wrong, sometimes we can fall back and not always be great at it, but you'll have enough wherewithal to say, right now, I am not using my EI. My emotional intelligence IQ is not very high based on the way I'm responding to this situation. Because when you have good emotional intelligence, you can check yourself before you wreck yourself. because that's the whole point of it. It's okay to still be human and emotional, but to know when you're taking it a little too far and to step back. So, of course, like I say with every show, go ahead, grab your beverage of choice. For me, I'm drinking white tea. It's really good. I had raspberry earlier, so grab some tea, coffee. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, so feel free to have, whatever beverage of your choice, glass of wine, beer, whatever's going to help you to enjoy it. Maybe you're listening to this after the fact. It doesn't matter. Just make sure that, I always say, grab a pencil and paper. I have to start saying that again because I'm pretty sure I'm going to drop a few things here and there that you're going to want to jot down and maybe reflect on later. So let's jump into episode 25. And I loved the meme for this, or the picture. It's not so much a meme, it's the picture because it was powerful. Claim your power. That picture within itself. Now, if you're listening, obviously you can't see it, but if you're watching, you can see it. I'll describe it for you. My favorite animal is elephants. Since I was a child, I've always had this love affair with elephants. They're just the most majestic and regal, just very regal animals. And their nature is kind and loving. They just, even from raising their young, it's just everything about them. They're very, very thoughtful. So it's just, I've always loved elephants and I have them throughout my house. Interesting enough, my grandmother on my father's side actually had a huge love affair with elephants as well. So I don't know if it's like a maternal or a family thing, but I've always loved elephants. So when I saw this picture of this elephant walking down a path and saying, claim your power, well, I'm like, I have to incorporate this into the show because it really, to me, embodies when you're proud, when you're open, when you stand your ground and you're doing the things that you want to do. I feel like this is how you look. Is key. So claim your power, which plays into, obviously, episode 25, which literally is termed Reclaim Your Power. Pretty straightforward, not rocket science on this. And I think it comes at the right time because if you're doing the work, then what you do with your power is so important. And so frequently, we give our power away consciously and unconsciously. So let's kind of jump into, I always like to do this. It's the semantic thing, is that let's talk about the actual definition of power. So what is power? If you were to pick up a dictionary, you're going to get a couple different definitions based on kind of, noun, verb, synonyms, things like that. So for all practical purposes, power, if we talk about it, is pretty much the capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events. So obviously it means having impact, being influential in something that directly affects you. So when we talk about reclaiming personal power, all we're doing is taking that concept of power and making it obvious or more personal. So what is personal power? And this came from a great article that I'm going to share with you on my website, M.A.Y.A.com. Remember, almost every episode has some type of episode companion. So extra information that I kind of want you to dive into. So you can go to M.A.Y.A.com, click on the podcast resource section, and there'll be some additional things there for you to check out. So within this article, I thought, I'm not going to sit here and reinvent the wheel because I thought her definition of personal power was great. Power is ultimately the ability to create or a desired result. It's the ability to attract and create circumstance that leads to our gain, which in turn builds our own sense of power. So obviously, it's really you navigating a situation, whether it be work related, it could be within personal relationships, family dynamics, friendships, or whatever, business, whatever it is you're doing. But you are you're doing things that are moving you towards a desired result that you want. Because power is really obviously attributed to acquiring something that you desire. Now, mind you, we also know that power is a slippery slope because we can watch how people can be in powerful positions and how they often may abuse their power. So you can see how people can be in power and they lose it because they fail to use it properly for the resource that it is and to appreciate what it is. So that's the key thing about personal power. It's about you using within your abilities to achieve something that you want, a desired result. So that's the key thing about power. And obviously, we know why so many people will be attracted to it because of it. But what is the source of power? That's something that you really have to start to understand. And this is something that I think will instantly resonate with most people when I talk about this, because there are different ways that you can pull in the resources that you need to be able to tap into what you need to have the power to create, to define, to sometimes redesign. Because power is not about anything being fixed. It's about whatever you're trying to achieve, You're putting forth the effort to do it. But what's key to understand about power is, where does it come from? Okay, you know me, I'm always going to share these like little graphic things because I can't help myself, because I think it's good and it's visual aids and you don't have to stare at me for like 45 minutes. So this is pretty straightforward. What is power? Where does it come from? So when you talk about personal power within this particular graphic, so there's power by association, okay? Power by association plays into, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's being aligned with maybe people who already have power that are influential. Sometimes you can be born into a position that gives you power. Hence the conversation about privilege and power should never be confused. FYI, just know that. But that would be another whole podcast within itself. So you can pull power often from who you are associated with. Another way to tap into power is through achievement. The more you are successful and you experience success, it tends to drive you to want to do more to recreate that experience. So, achievement can be this catalyst to constantly say, wow, I did this. Now here's my next goal. This is what I'm going to do. And then there's power by reflection, and this is key. Power by reflection is being able to say, I had success with this. I did not have success with that, and this is why. And it's really being able to really step back and look at yourself to figure out, where was your shortcomings in something and where did you actually thrive and where did you do good? It's being able to look within yourself and really, really be objective when it's key. Remember, objectivity and subjectivity are also sitting at the table with us, along with emotional intelligence. Because to be able to accomplish anything right for yourself, you have to be able to be critical of yourself without being overboard about it, not being overly critical. It's important to evaluate without telling yourself everything you do is wrong. See the good and the bad in what you do. There's power by purpose, okay? Meaning, once you know what it is you're set out to achieve, you're focused. It drives you to it. This is while knowing what your core values are, which is a whole nother episode we had back maybe around 17 or 18, is important. Because once you discover what it is you feel that you want to achieve in your life, then you're going to be more focused, because you've reflected, you figure these things out about what you're trying to achieve. And then there's power by wisdom. And this is the one that all this kind of moves in this kind of sync. You may be using several of these things to harness the power that you need to get to the best version of yourself and to accomplish the things that you want. But power by wisdom is interesting because it's saying to a fact that you've learned from all the things that you have accomplished. And that wisdom is allowing you to keep growing and evolving and not becoming stagnant, because you can see and you've learned and you use your knowledge wisely. So these are different ways that you can tap into the power that you need to achieve things. And a lot of times people don't think about personal power because it's really something that's an intangible. And this is why it would be so easy to not pay attention, or why it's often so easy just to give it to others. So those are the 5 different ways that you can technically kind of tap into power sources to help you to get the motivation that you need. All right, let's have our first real talk time. You know what real talk time is when we got to put something on the table that needs to be said because you're probably thinking it in the back of your head. So the power struggle is real. Hence, we just added the word power into the struggle is real. Jot that down. Or just put it back in your mental Rolodex. The power struggle is real. So you might be saying to yourself, well, what exactly does that mean? Here's a key thing. So often we put our needs, wants, desires, and demands of others ahead of our own. Now, this is where this objective part is really super important, because there is a time and a place for certain things. I'm going to tell you something. One of those probably misused phrases, there's a time and a place for everything. Actually, no, there's not. Some things, there's never a time and a place for it, and it should never happen, or it should never be said. Just put that out there to you. You can look at current events that are going around in this country right now, and there's not a time nor a place for, like, what we say, for instance, what happened at the Capitol. There's no time or place for that. Now, does that not mean you can't express that you're unhappy about something within the government or our political situation? Yes, but there's a way to do it. So hence, there's never a time and a place for everything. So, the power struggle is real. Let's revisit what that often is saying. So often we put the needs, wants, desires, and demands of others ahead of our own. And that's where the struggle comes in, because in some situations, believe it or not, it's appropriate to do it. In other situations, it is not. And it's being able to distinguish between the two, which is really important. And what's more important about all of that when it's all said and done? Most of the time, the power struggle that you're experiencing isn't unconscious. It's a pattern of behavior that we often have normalized, like doing for others before we do for ourselves. Most people have children. It tends to be a way that it is. And even when their children get to a point where they can be far more self-sufficient and should be learning more independence, sometimes we can't stop doing it because we've gotten so accustomed, and hence so have they. So often when you give too much of your power away, where you're always focused on somebody else and making sure that what they need is being met, you tend to then not make sure that your own needs are being met. And believe it or not, when you do things consistently and you create that pattern of behavior, it actually becomes expected by some people. Well, I just kind of expected you were going to do it because you always do that. So why would it be any different? And to be honest, if you have placed yourself in a situation where you constantly are that go-to person, and all of a sudden something happens and you weren't that go-to person and someone got upset with you about it, step back and think about it. Now, when you make a decision that I'm gonna step back and I'm gonna stop doing this, it's important that you share your thinking with people so you don't take them by surprise. You might get some pushback, but if you decided to change your trajectory within a relationship with somebody, if you're working in concert and together, then you shouldn't change your trajectory without telling them that you're changing it, if the relationship means something to you. So this being like, aha, I'm coming out the trick bag, that's actually malicious, especially if you've been consistently doing something in a relationship or at work and you decided, I'm tired of doing this. I've had that experience. I'm really tired of people coming to me and asking me to do this, because though it could be possibly in the scope of my job, it's also in the scope of their job. So I finally decided I was going to stop doing it. But I didn't just like stop. I just said, you know something, I think it's really important that everybody learns how to do this, because there might be a time, one, where I'm not here or my counterpart is not here, or I might be too busy to do it for you. And it's important that it gets done. So I'm going to show you how to do this, so in the future, you'll know. So now I haven't took anybody by surprise and just said, I'm not doing that. You figure it out. The other part that's important about the struggle, the power struggle, is real, is often when you're that person that's constantly the go-to person doing things for people, you hear words associated with your behavior like giver, you're unselfish, and you sacrifice. Because often those are the things that are thought or key ideas of people that are associated with them when they're always that go-to person, always a person who picks up the slack, always a person that's there for everybody. The power struggle is real, because when you get to a place where you realize you have overextended yourself, you feel undervalued, unappreciated, you have to step back and say, how much of myself did I actually surrender within this relationship and didn't think twice about it? Because remember, you set the standards in relationships, whether they're work relationships, personal relationships, relationship with your children, your significant other, your parents, family members. You set the standard at the behavior that people are going to expect of you. So if you're always the one who swoops in and fixes things, if you're always a person who arranges Christmas or Thanksgiving, then people are going to come to think that you're going to do it. So it's always important that if that's not what you want and you feel like, okay, I'm tired now, somebody else can do this. Well, that's called you're ready to take back your power, because you allowed people to overextend you. And now you no longer even enjoy remotely what you were doing. Or maybe at this point, it's just too much for you. See, there's different degrees of power that we have. Some is more important than others. So for instance, being that person who always maybe arranges Christmas or Thanksgiving, small thing, but it can be overwhelming at a time, especially if you're busy or have other things going on in your life. That's kind of maybe on the mid to lower end, depending upon how large your family is, truth be told. But then there's other power that has far more value to it in relationships, like how you communicate. If someone is emotionally there for you, those things have other value. So for instance, if you have friendships, relationships, work dynamics where you're always there for people, but they're never there for you, or they act like they don't have time for you, you might want to stop and evaluate that, because what you've done is surrender too much of your power. I'm always here. I'm the rock. But guess what? If we're playing rock, paper, scissors, I'm never winning at that game. That's something you have to evaluate, because now you've given too much of your power and your emotion into that situation. So the power struggle is real, and often we don't even know how much of it that we're really giving away. And that's a part that's interesting. So if you want to dig into this deeper, ask yourself, am I really surrendering my personal power? Or is that just me? Am I just really like a giver? Um, People will tell themselves that, well, I'm just a giver. I'm not really a taker. You need to strike a balance and learn how to be both, because everybody, as much as you are providing the oxygen for someone's flame to burn bright, you equally should be given that same type of respect and care. And that's why so many often relationships don't work with people, because we all know that relationships are not going to always be equally yoked. We know that. But there should be at least a semblance of some type of balance to it. It might be a little skewed. For instance, you might be heavy on one dynamic in the relationship, like maybe you are the person who always, washes dishes or takes out the trash. Just giving a basic example. But then on the flip side, maybe your significant other is the person who always goes grocery shopping and cook. So you guys have a dynamic that you've worked out that works, but everybody feels okay with it because you have a role that each of you have assumed that you're okay with. So there might be an imbalance to it, but as long as you're okay with that imbalance and you don't feel that you're giving more than what you're receiving, then it's okay. Everything's not always going to be 50-50. The world is not designed that easily. I wish it was, that we could strike a balance in everything that we do. Imagine how wonderful the world would be if that was the case. But let's just say you're thinking about this now, and you're saying to yourself, okay, now I'm kind of feeling like I've got some situations where I've surrendered too much of my power, and I need to reclaim it. And we probably can all think of situations that we're in, whether they be work, relationships or dynamics, or, personal with family, friends, whatever, where we know this is a situation that's not necessarily the best situation for us. And initially it might've been unconscious in the behavior that we were exhibiting or doing, but we came to realize something wasn't quite right. But then we let things just kind of keep going the way they were. So here are 5 signs you are surrendering your personal power. And some of these you're going to be like, that's interesting. One of the first ones, you avoid saying no or telling people your true desires and thoughts. That is the first place you are relinquishing, you are surrendering your personal power. If you are dealing with people where you can't be honest, even if it's to a fault, even if it's going to be unpleasant, but if you feel like you can't express what you need or you want, because let's just say it turns into an argument, you get ignored, or you tell them something and it goes right back to the way it was, that right there is telling you a lot about that relationship. It's probably not the healthy. And understand this, surrendering of power can happen in healthy and unhealthy relationships. When you surrender your power, it doesn't mean it's always unhealthy. Like I said, you may give more of yourself in situations like with children because you have to. That's a healthy way that you're giving up a piece of yourself to accommodate something that's necessary. So every time you surrender your power, it doesn't mean that it's bad. But for instance, if you were a parent that has a child that because you've always given them something or did things for them, and you're trying to kind of give them that independence and they give you pushback and they're rude and they're disrespectful, okay, now you have to think about that power dynamic again. Seriously, because now they're taking for granted or they're struggling with the change you're giving them. But it doesn't mean you have to keep accommodating. I give an example how I have a friend who has an adult daughter who is just like really an ass, seriously. And she has given her so much of her power that their last argument was so intense. She was trying to tell her mother how she should live her life and went as far as to say, and by the way, my friend does not listen to my show. Because if she did, she was not talking about her. But she went as far as to say, you're not being the kind of grandmother that I wanted you to be. I wanted my son to have a grandmother like this. Does that tell you how much she had surrendered her power in that relationship with her daughter? And to be honest, she had no idea how to reclaim it, though we talked about it, because she valued that her daughter's happiness over her own. She'd rather suffer, be disrespected on a level that I tell you that most people would probably say, we're not doing this. But she accepted her disrespect in front of others, not just behind closed doors, because she valued that relationship and her happiness more than her own. The power struggle is real. Seriously. And she's not in this episode right now. She's several episodes back still working through some of the other things about understanding value, worth, communication, depression. She's way back in other episodes. So this episode, everybody may not be ready for it, because if you're still discovering the things that you are struggling with, if you're still kind of processing how to be a better communicator, then reclaiming your personal power might be difficult because you're not going to know how to really express it to people. So this is why these episodes, I didn't intend them to be this way, but I feel like they're flowing this way intentionally without it being that way. So the first thing to know is that if you're avoiding saying no, if you feel like if I say no, this is going to turn ugly. So why is that the case? Or if you can't tell a person how you feel about a situation that's bothering you or you're unhappy with because you're afraid of how they're going to respond, your power has been surrendered to that person, that situation. Another thing to consider is you feel run over by your emotions, or you think that it isn't safe to feel emotions anymore because of the outcome of when you do. That means other people have made you feel like you have to silo yourself and you can't express yourself. So hence you're like, when I do express my emotions, I feel like it just takes over and I can't control it. Or I'd rather not deal with emotions at all because just the fact of if I don't feel, then I don't hurt and I don't have to be disappointed. You've given up a big part of your power of happiness, because emotions, especially if you're focused on the emotional intelligence, like we said, is a powerful thing. Remember, as your focus goes, your energy will follow. That was an episode as well. So the reason I'm always saying that your emotional intelligence is always sitting at the table in this conversation, because the minute you learn how to identify the things that make you feel a certain way and why they make you feel that way, this is how you get to reclaim your power. Because now you're not as vulnerable without knowing what's happening. So, assuming that you want to control or curb your emotions because you think that's best, you've already surrendered one of the most important things that you need to be aware of and using, which is your emotional intelligence. A third thing to take a note of is you allow external forces like partners, society, parents, religion, children, whatever, to dictate what you do with your life. If everything you do, for instance, you decide, well, I can't make that decision, or I can't do this because of my job. I get it. Some people love their work, and if that's what your focus is, but it's impacting your rest of your life in a negative way, then that's a problem. But you have to determine where that value sits. Partners, if every decision you make has to be incumbent upon what your partner, what they want first, you've surrendered power. That applies to, obviously children, things of that nature, family members, even society. If you are afraid to, so to speak, live out loud or be your authentic self because you're afraid of the pushback you're going to get, you have surrendered your power. Because you feel there's a set of norms, mores out there that if I don't do this, it's not going to be okay. You're not comfortable with yourself, which means you're surrendering your power and just going along and going through the motions because you don't want to rock the boat. Rock the boat. Don't tip the boat over. Anyways, 4, repetitive relationship patterns. This is one that people probably don't get because they keep doing it. So what this means is you probably say, I must have like the worst energy ever, because why do I keep attracting these people to me? Now, there's something to be said about that. Energy is huge. I'm a big person in energy. Yes, I like to keep mine, high and clean and focused. I really, really coveted my energy at this point. And if you find you keep attracting the same type of people into your life, whether it be friends, romantic relationships, something of that nature, and you don't feel fulfilled, you have to stop and ask yourself, well, the biggest issue here is that when you decide to keep getting back into the same type of relationship that's negative and not healthy, because remember I said, sometimes when you surrender, it can be healthy. When you surrender your power, it can be healthy. But if you find you keep getting into certain patterns of behaviors with people that are not healthy, like you're not happy, all of a sudden these relationships become emotionally abusive or whatever the case may be, you're unsatisfied, but you keep doing the same thing, you're allowing yourself to give into something that's not healthy. And it's probably the idea that you don't want to be alone. You struggle with the idea maybe of abandonment. There's different things for why people will surrender their power and repeat the same kind of behavior with people and over and over again. The key thing is you taking the time and energy to figure out, why do I keep doing that? Okay, why? Because it doesn't make any sense. LaDonna Ray makes a good point here. I don't mind surrendering my power to a trusted partner. That sounds like a woman in love. Actually, LaDonna, again, there are healthy surrenders. You know what a healthy surrender is? To say that means you feel there is a neutrality in that relationship, that you trust them enough that where you feel that you have to do certain things to be accommodating, you don't feel like that's a loss. So the interesting thing is, it depends on what you're surrendering. But I guarantee you, if it turned into, well, I need to do this and that, and there was no balance, it sounds like you struck a balance with that person, which is an entirely different experience, because there can be sometimes that you surrender your power in healthy situations. So just know that. But you need to know and make sure that's really not you per se, but people need to make sure it's as healthy as you think it is, and it isn't a figure of your imagination because you're in the moment. Even though we always say we want you to be present in everything, and being present is important. But at the same time, make sure that if you're present in something, it's something that's positive and has purpose. This fifth one is one that throws people for a loop about surrendering power. Any addiction. So seriously, if you find you cannot buy shoes, if you find you can't stop shopping online, if you know financially you are struggling, but you can't stop spending money, eating out, going to dinner all the time, anything that you can't stop doing has control of you, and you have surrendered your power. So if it's like, I got to keep up with the Joneses, which means I'm always spending money I don't have, you have surrendered your power to the Joneses and the status quo. Because people with good sense will be like, I don't even really know the Joneses like that, so I'm trying to figure out why what they're doing is so important. Remember, the one saying we always squash on M.A.Y.A is that fake it till you make it. Absolutely not. Be who you are. Appreciate that. And what you want to change, you work to change. Because fake it till you make it is denying what your reality is. And if you don't like your reality, chances are you're not going to be making the appropriate changes because you're so busy trying to mask it. So there is no fake it till you make it. It's be you, be comfortable with it, but work on making that change to getting to that better version of yourself that you want to be. But it's interesting because that usually takes a lot of work to be comfortable with yourself and to do the work. That's why people like being fake, because they can just go through the motions and they wear a mask, but at some point, eventually it will catch up with you. So those are 5 signs that pretty much you're surrendering your personal power. And a lot of times, I think most people are aware enough that that's the case. Like they know it. But they've normalized that, well, I just kind of do that all the time. And they've accepted it. Well, there comes a point in time where there's probably things that you should not accept because it's just not healthy. So we're going to take a quick little break. Think about this, because we're going to talk about in the next half of the show, how can you reclaim your power? What can you do? How can you be that difference maker? How can you get to where you really want to be and be happy and strike that balance in your relationships? But the key thing, this is about striking that balance with yourself first, because once you strike that balance here, guess what? Striking it on the outside of yourself becomes a little bit easier because you'll stop compromising yourself, because guess what? We talked about where you're pulling that power from. And it may be less about association and more about reflection and achievement and wisdom. And when you're pulling from those sources, because all those sources aren't created equal, and depending upon where you're in your life, you may have more in one source bank than you do in the other. But that's something that you have to evaluate. All right, everybody, let's take a quick break. I want to play one of my favorite PSAs that I have not played in a while. And we'll come back and then we'll jump into and talking about how can you reclaim the power that you've, unbeknownst to yourself, surrendered. You're tuned into M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. Sit tight. I'll be right back.
Compassion, noun. Sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. We're all born with it. It's in us. Don't believe me? When you hear a baby cry, something pulls at you. You want to ease that pain. You want to soothe that hurt. No one had to teach you that. It's called compassion, and it's in you. However, at some point you turned it off when it came
to me.
Me. The cries of my soul have gone unheard, but today, you will hear me.
My heart has wailed a melody loud enough to shatter your ears, and you ignored me. But this week, you will hear me.
This body has beat the drums of anguish, only to be silenced. But this month, you will hear me.
This year,
this decade,
this century,
I will be heard. And
you will be the one to hear me.
And when I am finally heard,
show compassion.
Show compassion.
Show compassion.
Remember, it's in you.
But that is a very profound element.
Welcome back to Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. Thank you for tuning in. We're on the second half of episode 25, Reclaiming Your Power. Something that people probably don't often give a thought to, how much they give their power to others. And they wonder why they often end in these situations where they're unhappy, they feel stuck, they feel unfulfilled. Because you're waiting for someone else to be the catalyst of change, when we all know that change comes from you. And that comes from you reclaiming your power. Because the thing you need to be careful about with power is who you give your power to. And we so often give it away so easily. And I'm not saying you have to make a person run a marathon to trust them enough to surrender your power or to be agreeable. Because remember I said, there'll be a balance that you can strike in good relationships because that person will have your back. Here's a couple things to know. If you've got somebody's back and they don't have yours, I would ask you why you're in that relationship. Stop seeing the good in people and see them for who they are. We often make these exceptions, and when we are disappointed, we wonder why. Because we are not to attempt to navigate who someone is. Let them show you who they are authentically. And when they show you, don't make an excuse not to accept it. Figure out what you're going to do with it. And if you've given them any of your power, then you need to make changes accordingly. Okay, so let's talk about how can you reclaim your power now. Now, mind you, I did say before we went to break, and hopefully you enjoyed that PSA, that is actually a campaign that's going through Chicago. Of course, it can apply anywhere based on some of the social justice things that we've seen happening throughout the country in 2020 and rolling into 2021. But it's powerful. Compassion is a big word, and empathy. And empathy is not easy, but compassion can be there if you're a good person. Now, if you're not, that might be another story. But how can you reclaim your power now? Well, it really depends on where you're at in this best version of you journey. Because if you're not willing to be objective and honest with yourself, then reclaiming your power is going to be difficult to do. Because there's other work you need to do to tap into that you and understanding where you want, where your core values are, finding your voice to be able to properly communicate yourself. Because when you decide to reclaim your power, you're going to do it very matter-of-factly and not secretly, because you didn't give it away secretly. You gave it away openly, so you can take it back in the open as well. So what's key about reclaiming your power now is once you recognize the signs that we just talked about and you're willing to reclaim your power, it can shift within you very quickly. And your outer circumstances and your reality will change. But be ready for that change. Okay, here it comes. Real talk 2. Real talk time 2. This may keep popping up in several episodes. Write this down because it's one of the things that I think is so important. You are being presented with a challenge because you want to make a change. So if you remember, one of the memes I had shown last week, and I'll do again, and there was an episode, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. And I showed this meme that pretty much talks about you can't spell challenge without change. And like I said, if you're viewing it, the show, you see it. If you're listening, Just kind of put on your little thinking cap, get back to like, spelling bee you had maybe in 6th grade or something. And the word challenge is spelled C-H-A. And then you add the L-L-E, and that's what makes it different from change. The key thing about that meme, and remember I said that L-L-E has a lot of important value. Because remember I said in challenge that L-L-E has an acronym, look, listen, evaluate. So then you can engage change. And that's what's key. So when you're reclaiming your power, people, guess what? You are challenging yourself to step into the light and address something that you maybe have wanted to do for a while, but you were afraid because of the consequences. What if I tell this person how I feel and they don't want to be my friend anymore, or they don't want to be in a relationship anymore? Well, then I'm going to be alone. Well, is it worth me then challenging it? Because I'm happy most of the time. It's just some of these things make me unhappy. So you're being challenged. If you've surrendered your power and you want it back, it may be uncomfortable. You can probably throw the word uncomfortable in that meme as well. So when you're looking to reclaim your personal power, it's important that you ask yourself, how have I surrendered my power? Why have I surrendered my power? And for what have I surrendered my power? Because those should be your evaluation tools. So you're looking to say, why did I do that? And you're listening to kind of think, to kind of feel and hear yourself and hear what's happening around you, how people respond to you, those engagements that you're having with people that you're finding like, this is where I've surrendered some power here. I'm listening to this conversation and I'm not liking what I'm hearing. But this conversation was probably always going on. So for what exactly did I surrender my power? Did you surrender it for love? Love makes you do a lot of things, a lot of crazy things. Did you surrender it because it had a financial gain? How many people hate their jobs, but because they make good money, they tolerate it, but they're so unhappy. They're doing things they don't want. They've surrendered that ability to be happy because the dollar means more to them than their happiness. So you have to ask yourself those 3 questions when you're evaluating how you surrendered power. How have I surrendered it? Why have I surrendered it? And for what? Now, if somehow the answer to these questions are relatively positive, like I said, every time you surrender your power is not necessarily unhealthy. And I don't think those are going to be the relationships that you're going to question. It's going to be the ones that make you unhappy, that make you feel unappreciated and undervalued. Those will be the things that will make you question, why am I doing all this and the return on my emotional investment is not getting the kind of return that I want from it? I am not satisfied. I am not happy. Those are going to be the relationship dynamics that you're going to question. And it's key. So once you've answered those questions, you'll gain a greater understanding of what you have given up and what you need to get it back. And that's the complicated point, because that's the challenge. Because honestly, when it's all said and done, all the other things that we've been working on, you're now going to have to kind of call them into action. Because being able to properly communicate with someone how you're feeling, this is why your emotional intelligence is always out on the table, is going to be really key. And remember, I say, when you decide to step up, know there's always a consequence. It could be good or bad. And if you're living in this reality that is yours, you're probably hoping that it's only going to be good. Well, it might not be. And you have to be ready for that consequence when you decide to regain your power, because at this point, you've made the decision that you want that back, or you at least want some of it back to be happy. Because remember, all power is not created equal. So be prepared for the fact that whatever you have to do might have consequences. So I would tell you, for instance, if you're looking to regain some power that you surrendered at work, just know there could be pushback from that, depending upon how you approach it. Because remember, I said, don't make sweeping changes that other people are involved in without kind of getting them involved with the fact that you're about to make a change. Because that's you striking a better balance than they have struck with you. So if you need to make that change, the conversations and the actions you take leading up to reclaiming your power is important, because when you take it back, you want to be like, something that felt really, really good. Like, I took my power back And I don't think like it wasn't like I created collateral damage, which by the way, every now and then it can be, because you may have to tell people things that they don't like, or maybe that they were unaware of that was going on because you've allowed this masquerade to happen for so long. So I think it's important to understand when you're reclaiming power, be prepared that you may not get the response from the person or the situation that you necessarily desired, because you're pulling something away that for them had become an accommodation, and it's no longer an accommodation. Just know that. So this is why a lot of people just tend to go through the motions, and they allow these negative patterns of behavior, or they allow themselves to be unhappy because they don't want to be uncomfortable, because they value the other person's emotions. Sometimes they just value their respect, and they're afraid to rock the boat. So make sure that when you're ready to reclaim your power, you're not doing this lighthearted. You're going in fiercely, you're going in honestly, but do it the right way, which means approach it with a conversation that sets the table, that they can sit down with you with emotional intelligence and objectivity. And remember I said, it's how you set that table that allows you to approach it. So say, for instance, you're in a relationship with somebody and you really feel that you're not appreciated. And that's difficult, because to tell somebody that you don't feel appreciated, especially if you care for them, you're never sure how they're going to respond. Now, it's either they could know it and didn't care, or remember, there was a whole episode about perception and perspective. What you believe is your reality does not mean that is actually the reality for the other person. They may be so accustomed to being a certain way with you, or this is how things have always been with them with other people, they assume that this is the okay and this is the way that it should be. So it's always important when you decide to take back your power from someone that you don't do it in an accusing and insulting and critical way, because you don't know what they were thinking as these interactions were unfolding. And like I said, if you were the person that was walking along this whole path with them and you weren't stopping them, this is why it's so important when you engage in new relationships with people. From the very beginning, start to set boundaries and standards and some key expectations without going overboard, okay? I mean, expectations don't have to be lofty. They could be simple things that you need to feel are healthy in existence in your relationship. So, for instance, if you're a person how someone talks to you impacts your response, part of your EI is the minute someone kind of gets disrespectful with you or talks down to you, it's going to trigger something, then it's okay to say, I just want to be upfront. When you talk to me like that, like your tone of voice, it bothers me. I'm not your child, but yet I felt like you were talking to me like you were talking to your 16-year-old. I'm not your 16-year-old. That's just the way I felt. Now, does that mean that's what your intention was? No, but that's just the way I felt. I just want you to make you aware of something that I don't particularly care for. If you start doing those kind of things with people early in your relationship, either they're going to be okay with it and respect you and adhere to your needs, or they're going to blow you off and do what they do. And you'll know right there, it isn't like you had to read my mind because I told you what I did not like. The needs and wants in relationships are important. Your needs need to be met. Your wants can be something you can work with over time, or you might have to strike a balance or some type of compromise, because you can't have everything you want all the time exactly the way that you want it. That's called utopia. And none of us can have everything all the time. Even if you have access to all the money in the world, some of the most wealthiest people in this world are miserable. So just know, when you decide to address an issue with someone that you feel that you've overextended yourself, or you're ready to kind of dial something back, just set up the table right and say, I need to talk to you about something. Timing's everything. So if you see a person is distracted, just not mad, had a bad day, then don't try to have a really important conversation with somebody that you know that might not be emotionally and mentally present with you, and they're going to miss the conversation. So wait until there's some time to say, hey, there's something I need to talk to you about, but I don't think right now is a good time. But then, if you say that too, they're gonna be like, what do you want to talk to me about? And they're just going to bother them. Because don't you hate when someone says, well, I'll just talk to you about it later. It's like, no, because now you brought it up and now I'm curious, like, what do you want to talk to me about? So just be mindful, if you know that person well enough, to kind of know that when is the right time to talk about it. And then when you start to talk about it, just be honest and say, I need to talk to you about something that's been on my mind. By no means am I saying that I feel that this is what the intention was, but because it's something I can't seem to get past, or it's under my skin, or it's been going on for a while, and I feel like it probably won't stop unless I make it known that it's something I'm uncomfortable with, I wanted to bring it up. So now you've said, I'm not blaming you. I'm not saying it's your fault. It has been going on for a while. I didn't say anything. And sometimes you'll find with a person who has good emotional intelligence or any form of compassion or empathy, they'll be like, I'm sorry, that was not my intention. I didn't know you felt that way. And that's a key thing. We have to stop assuming that people should know how we feel. Tell someone how you feel. Tell someone what you need. So then if they fail to do it, you can't be angry because they didn't know, because you told them. And that tells them what their intention is towards you. And that's part of reclaiming your power. Remember, being comfortable with expressing your needs and wants while you're also making sure that you strike that balance and you're also addressing someone else's needs and wants is key. But finding that voice and that right tone in that voice is really important. And this is where people struggle. That's why episode back about communication is so key, because being a good communicator can change your life. Seriously. Being able to properly express yourself to people. People will understand you. It commands respect. You'll be like, that situation could have been, the way you handled that was great, just because you knew how to express yourself, because you weren't letting that negative energy that could have taken you down the wrong path control what you said. Remember, we're not big into reacting. Part of the best version of you is learning how to respond to things, which means I stop, I reflect, I listen, I see what's going on. And then I decide how I want to then in turn respond. Reacting is always something you have to go back up and clean up, because it usually means you probably didn't handle things the way you would have if you just would have let a cooler head prevail. Hence, that's why we're always, always, always working on what? Our emotional intelligence. So, as I said, Miriam's on the show, but we're going to end it with one of my favorite songs that she covers, and this is going to tell you how hokey I am. But I think in today's world, I can't imagine in the current climate, why not end it with something like this? And I'm sure for some of you, it'll be a little bit nostalgic, because I'm assuming most of my listeners are in my age demographic, so I think it'll have some nostalgia for you. But before we get to that, the final thought about reclaiming your power. Reclaiming your power may be far more difficult than it was to surrender it. This new shift may not be shared reality for all involved. Just know that. So often we give up our power without even thinking about it, because most of us, maybe before today, didn't even think about the concept of personal power and presence and finding a voice. But now you may be reflecting like, I didn't see what I was doing as giving up power. Some people may take the word power and feel like it's control in some situations. Remember, important to know the difference. Power, control. Control is a whole different beast. And when people start to abuse power, it tends to look like control. So know the difference. All of a sudden I got Janet Jackson spinning in my head. I was about to start singing. I've done good with that lately. Since Miriam's been on the show, I stopped singing. So just know that this will not necessarily be an easy task. It could come with good and bad consequences. So make sure when you do it with intent, you do it with purpose. And tap into those sources that we talked about. Remember, I talked about there's a source of your power. It could be obviously through association, which is fine, but I'm far more into the other ones, which is about achievement, wisdom. All those things that are from you are so key. Reflection. And maybe one of those power banks has more than the other. Maybe a little bit of reflection and focus might be what you need to regain your power. So use what you have first internally and figure out how you've given it up to somebody else before you reclaim it. Do it with a plan and do it with intention. Never make this move without being able to do the follow through or accept the consequences that come from it. Because remember, surrendering it is going to be a heck of a lot easier than maybe taking it back. This is like emotional and mental war sometimes. And you may lose a battle, but it's all about the war when it's all said and done. And the battle is for you, getting to that best version of yourself. So hopefully this conversation about personal power has been enlightening, insightful, or whatever the case may be. So I'm going to wrap up the show, and I'll end it with Miriam's show. So as I always say to everybody, first of all, make sure you listen to episodes of M.A.Y.A. You can go to my website, M.A.Y.A.kai.com, and there will be some podcast companion things for this. So just go to M.A.Y.A.kai.com, click on podcast resource tab, drop down to episode 25, and I'll give some supplemental things in there for you to listen to. Make sure, please, please, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, M.A.Y.A. Kai. Search that on YouTube. A couple M.A.Y.A. Kais will come up. It's actually quite a popular thing. I wouldn't have thought, but you'll see me. My picture will be there. You'll know it's me. So make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate that. But if you happen to have a podcast platform of choice, I understand that, because actually I always audit my shows. So I'm in my car. I have CarPlay. I actually go to, iTunes, and I listen to them when I'm in a car. Sometimes I put it on my TV in my house. So, you can maybe listen to me on Amazon. Alexa, find Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. Anyways, but either way, you can find me on iTunes, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audibles. I'm actually on Spotify. I'm on quite a few things, and it's growing. So if you happen to have, your podcast platform of choice, I won't hold it against you. You can always, go and listen how you choose to. But either way, I appreciate when everybody tunes in. How do I always end the show when I say this to you? Until the next time, everyone, remember, your present becomes your past, and your future is no more. So it's important that you live every single day with meaning and to the fullest, because you're always evolving. Every single day, you're evolving, because it's a change and it's an opportunity to do something different. So don't take it for granted. All right, everybody. I'll see you next Thursday. We're going to jump into maybe some more financial talk as we're kind of moving into the year to put people on a brighter path. Because remember, I said we did a lot of emotional and mental talk, but now we want to expand that into the financial, the spiritual, the physical, all those other things that impact your life and help you to get to the best version of you. So we're going to take a shift and add some more information on the table, because that might interest a lot more people. So we'll do that too. All right, everybody, I am out of here. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday and go on and have an absolutely amazing and phenomenal week. I'll see you next week, Thursday, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Spread the word. All right, here is Miriam McQueen performing the Rainbow Connection, which many of you will know, but I think it's a good way to end the show with some positivity and some uplifting thoughts. All right, ciao.
So many songs about rainbows and what's on the other side. Rainbows are visions, but only illusions. Rainbows have nothing to hide. So we've been told, and some choose to believe it. I know they're wrong, wait and see. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. Said that every wish would be heard and answered, and wished on a morning star. Somebody thought of that, and someone believed in. Look what it's done so far. What's so amazing and keeps us stargazing? What do we think we might see? Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. Half asleep, and have you heard voices? I've heard them calling my name. Are those the sweet sounds that called the young sailors? I think they're one and the same. I've heard it too many times, still ignored. It's something I'm supposed to be. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and